You know what makes me absolutely furious? Watching an entire generation get financially destroyed by advice that sounds perfectly reasonable on the surface, but is actually a trap that keeps them broke forever. Millennials were told to follow the rules, go to college, get a good job, buy experiences, not things, live in a cool city, and everything would work out. Except it didn't. Now there's an entire generation in their 30s and 40s with six-figure student debt, zero savings, no homes, delayed families, and absolutely no idea how they ended up here despite doing everything they were told to do. It's like watching someone follow a GPS that's deliberately routing them off a cliff while everyone cheers them on for being so adventurous. My name is John, and I spend way too much time analyzing why millennials are the first generation in modern American history expected to be financially worse off than their parents. And here's what I've discovered. It's not just bad luck or a tough economy. There's a specific set of money traps that were designed and marketed specifically to this generation, disguised as progressive thinking and lifestyle optimization, but actually functioning as a wealth extraction machine that keeps people perpetually broke while thinking they're making smart choices. If you're a millennial who's tired of feeling financially behind despite working hard and making good decisions, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this ends up being the reality check that finally helps you escape the trap. Here's something that should absolutely terrify you. According to recent data, the average millennial has $27,900 in debt, not including mortgages. The median millennial retirement savings is $35,000, and 45% of millennials have zero retirement savings at all. Zero. Meanwhile, the average boomer at the same age had significantly more saved and significantly less debt. This isn't a coincidence. This is the direct result of a systematic money trap that convinced an entire generation to make financially catastrophic decisions while believing they were being smart and progressive. Truth is, millennials were sold a lie dressed up as enlightened thinking. Don't buy a house, that's so boomer and limiting. Invest in experiences, not things. Live in expensive coastal cities where the opportunities are. Your degree will pay for itself. Follow your passion. Every single one of these pieces of advice, which sounded so reasonable and modern, has contributed to creating a generation that's financially devastated. And the worst part, most millennials still defend these choices because admitting they were wrong means confronting how much money and time they've wasted. Today, I'm going to break down the specific money traps that have destroyed millennial wealth, explain exactly how each one works, and tell you how to escape them before they consume your entire financial future. And I guarantee some of this is going to make you uncomfortable, especially the part about how experiences over things is actually keeping you poor, and why that expensive apartment in a cool neighborhood is the worst financial decision you're making right now. But before we dive into the specific traps, let me tell you why this matters so urgently. Imagine you're 35 years old. You've followed all the millennial advice. You've been renting in an expensive city for 10 years, spending $2,500 per month on a cool apartment. That's $300,000 you've spent with zero equity to show for it. Meanwhile, your friend who bought a boring house in a boring suburb for $250,000 10 years ago now has $150,000 in equity, has been paying less per month than you, and has a locked-in payment that won't increase. You're both 45 now, and their net worth is $500,000 higher than yours, not because they earned more, but because they didn't fall for the trap. The opportunity cost of these millennial money traps is absolutely devastating. Every year you stay trapped is a year you fall further behind on wealth building. Every decision you make based on this bad advice compounds into hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost wealth over your lifetime. The financial damage isn't just about today, it's about missing out on decades of compound growth that you can never get back. Let's get into the specific money traps, and I'm going to be brutally honest about each one because that's what you need, not more comfortable lies. Trap number 1. The experiences over things scam. This is probably the most insidious trap because it sounds so enlightened and anti-materialistic. Millennials were told that buying things doesn't make you happy, but experiences do, so you should spend your money on travel, concerts, festivals, restaurants, and adventures instead of accumulating possessions. And here's the problem. This advice is technically true about happiness, but financially catastrophic. Here's what nobody told you. Experiences depreciate to zero the moment they're over. That $3,000 trip to Europe? Gone forever. That $200 concert ticket? Disappeared. That $150 brunch? Evaporated. Meanwhile, things, when purchased intelligently, can either hold value, generate income, or appreciate. A house is a thing that typically appreciates. Stocks are things that generate wealth. Even a quality watch or piece of art can hold value. But your Instagram photos from Bali have exactly zero financial value. The experiences over things mentality has created a generation that spends tens of thousands of dollars per year on experiences that leave them with nothing but memories and social media content while having zero assets that generate wealth. And when you point this out, they get defensive and talk about how fulfilled they are and how they're living life to the fullest. Meanwhile, they're 35 with $8,000 in their bank account and panic attacks about retirement. Here's the reality that nobody wants to admit. You can have experiences after you build wealth. In fact, experiences are better when you're wealthy because you're not stressed about money. You can travel whenever you want, eat at nice restaurants regularly, and go to events without checking your bank account anxiously afterward. But when you prioritize experiences over wealth building in your 20s and 30s, you trap yourself in a cycle of working forever to fund temporary pleasures, instead of building assets that eventually fund permanent freedom. The math is brutal. Let's say a typical millennial spends $8,000 per year on experiences like travel, concerts, festivals, and expensive dining from age 25 to 35. That's $80,000 in spending that disappears. If instead they had invested that $8,000 per year in a simple index fund, earning 10% annually, they'd have approximately $140,000 by age 35. That's not even accounting for the compound growth from 35 to 65, which would turn that $140,000 into over $2 million. That trip to Thailand literally cost you millions in future wealth. I'm not saying never have experiences. I'm saying prioritize building assets first, then fund experiences from your wealth later. The reversed order, which is what millennials were convinced to do, is a trap that keeps you broke forever. Trap number 2, the expensive city money pit. Millennials were convinced that living in expensive coastal cities like New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, or Austin is essential for career success and quality of life. That's where the opportunities are. That's where things are happening. That's where you need to be to network and advance your career. And while there's a grain of truth to this for specific industries, for most people it's financially devastating. Here's the actual math. The median rent in San Francisco is around $3,400 per month. In New York City, it's around $3,600. In Austin, it's around $1,700. Meanwhile, in perfectly livable cities like Charlotte, Indianapolis, or Nashville, you can rent for $1,200 to $1,400. That difference of $2,000 to $2,400 per month is $24,000 to $28,800 per year that expensive city residents are hemorrhaging just in rent difference. But it's not just rent. Everything costs more in expensive cities. Food, entertainment, transportation, parking, utilities, everything. The total cost of living difference can easily be $30,000 to $40,000 per year. And here's the kicker. Salaries in expensive cities don't actually compensate for the cost of living difference in most fields. Yes, a software engineer makes more in San Francisco than in Charlotte, but after accounting for cost of living, they're often financially worse off. Let me give you a concrete example. Person A makes $80,000 per year in Charlotte, pays $1,400 in rent, and spends $35,000 per year total on living expenses. They save $45,000 annually. Person B makes $120,000 in San Francisco, pays $3,400 in rent, and spends $85,000 per year on living expenses. They save $35,000 annually. Person B makes 50% more in salary, but saves less money and lives in a smaller apartment with a longer commute and higher stress. Over 10 years, Person A saves $450,000, while Person B saves $350,000. But it's actually worse than that, because Person A could have bought a house in Charlotte for $280,000 and built $150,000 in equity over those 10 years, bringing their total net worth difference to $250,000, despite earning significantly less. This is the expensive city trap in action. But when you point this out, millennials defend their expensive city living with vague arguments about culture and being where things are happening and career opportunities. Meanwhile, they're 38 years old with no assets, no home, no savings, and they're one layoff away from financial catastrophe because they spent 15 years bleeding money to live somewhere cool. I'm not saying The trap is that expensive cities feel like you're winning because you're surrounded by successful people, going to trendy restaurants and living an Instagram-worthy life. But you're actually falling behind financially every single month. The cool neighborhood is a consumption expense disguised as a life investment. Trap number 3, the student debt disaster sold as investment. Millennials were told relentlessly that college is always worth it, that any degree pays for itself, that student debt is good debt because it's an investment in yourself. This might be the most expensive lie ever sold to a generation. The result? $1.7 trillion in student loan debt across millennials and Gen Z, with the average millennial owing nearly $40,000. Here's what nobody told millennials before they signed those loan papers. Not all degrees have positive ROI. A $120,000 degree in sociology or English literature from a private school is not an investment. It's a financial catastrophe. The job market doesn't care about your degree in most fields. What matters is skills, results, and network. You can build all three without spending $150,000 on college. But 18-year-olds were told to follow their passion and not worry about the money because college always pays off. So they took out massive loans to study things they were interested in without any consideration for whether those degrees would generate income that justified the cost. The result is an entire generation with 6-figure debt and 5-figure incomes, wondering why the math doesn't work. Here's the brutal reality. A degree in computer science or engineering from a state school that costs $60,000 total is an excellent investment. A degree in communications or art history from a private school that costs $200,000 is financial suicide. But millennials were told all degrees are equally valuable investments, which is an absolutely insane lie that's destroyed countless lives. The trap is compounded by how student loans work. They're not dischargeable in bankruptcy. The interest compounds while you're in school. The payments are structured to maximize interest paid over time. And most importantly, they prevent you from building wealth during your peak earning years because you're sending $800 per month to loan servicers instead of investing. Let me show you the damage. Person A graduates with no debt and makes $50,000. Person B graduates with $60,000 in debt and makes $55,000. Person A invests $800 per month starting at age 22. Person B pays $800 per month in student loans until age 32, then starts investing. By age 65, Person A has approximately $3.4 million. Person B has approximately $1.4 million. The student debt cost Person B $2 million in lifetime wealth, and that's assuming both have identical incomes after graduation, which often isn't even true. The worst part is millennials still defend their college choices because admitting they made a $100,000 mistake is too psychologically painful. So they rationalize it with vague statements about personal growth and learning to think critically, while their net worth remains negative into their 30s. Trap number 4, the career hopping without equity mistake. Millennials were told to job hop every 2 to 3 years to maximize salary growth, and this advice is actually correct in many fields. But here's what nobody mentioned. Not all compensation is created equal, and chasing salary increases while ignoring equity is how you stay broke while earning good money. The millennial approach has been to optimize for cash compensation and cool job titles at trendy companies. They'll take a job at a hot startup that pays $120,000 but gives minimal or no equity. Then they'll jump to another trendy company for $140,000 with equally irrelevant equity. Meanwhile, they completely ignore opportunities at earlier stage companies or situations where they could get significant equity stakes that might actually create wealth. Here's the truth about wealth building that millennials missed. Rich people don't get rich from salaries, they get rich from equity. Salaries pay your bills, equity builds your wealth. Every person who became wealthy working at Google, Facebook, Microsoft, or any successful startup did it through equity, not salary. The engineers making $200,000 per year are doing well. The engineers who got in early and had equity stakes became millionaires or multimillionaires. But millennials were conditioned to chase the highest cash salary at the coolest company right now, completely ignoring whether they were building any actual wealth. They optimized for current consumption ability instead of future wealth creation. And because they never build equity, they're trapped on the salary treadmill forever, needing to work until they're 70 because their only income source is active work. The trap is that high salaries feel like success. When you're making $150,000 per year, you feel successful. You can afford a nice apartment, eat at good restaurants, travel occasionally. But if you have zero equity and zero assets, you're just a high-income poor person. You stop working, your income stops. That's not wealth. That's just a well-paying job that keeps you comfortable, but never actually free. The word trap number 5. The renting is smart delusion. This trap might be responsible for more lost millennial wealth than any other. Millennials were convinced that buying houses is dumb, that renting provides flexibility, that homeownership is a ball and chain that limits your options. Financial influencers and media outlets published endless articles about why millennials are smart to rent and boomers were dumb to buy houses. And the result is an entire generation that poured millions of dollars into rent instead of building equity. And now they're locked out of homeownership because prices increased faster than they saved. Here's the actual truth about renting versus buying that millennials refuse to hear. Renting is paying your landlord's mortgage plus their profit margin. Every rent payment you make builds their wealth, while building yours exactly zero. When you rent for 10 years, you have nothing to show for the hundreds of thousands you spent. When you own for 10 years, you have equity, forced savings, tax deductions, and an asset that typically appreciates. But millennials convinced themselves that renting was the smart financial choice because it meant flexibility to move for jobs, no maintenance costs, no being tied down. These are rationalizations for a bad financial decision. The flexibility to move is worth something, but it's not worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost wealth. And most millennials aren't even using that flexibility. They're renting in the same expensive city for 10 years straight, which is the worst of both worlds. Here's the math that destroys this argument. Let's compare two people over 15 years, from age 25 to 40. Person A rents for $2,000 per month, total paid $360,000, equity gained 0. Person B buys a house for $300,000 with a $2,000 per month mortgage payment, total paid $360,000, but they have equity from principal payments, home appreciation, and they can deduct mortgage interest. After 15 years, person B typically has $200,000 to $300,000 in equity, depending on the market. The difference in net worth between person A and B is massive, despite identical monthly payments. But the trap goes deeper. While millennials were renting and telling themselves they were being smart and flexible, housing prices in most markets doubled or tripled. The house that was $300,000 when they were 25 is now $600,000 when they're 35, and suddenly they can't afford to buy even if they wanted to. They rented themselves out of ever being able to afford a home, and now they're facing the nightmare scenario of renting forever, while housing costs continue to increase, but their rent-burdened selves can't save for a down payment. The really insidious part of this trap is how millennials were convinced that homeownership is an outdated boomer value rather than the primary wealth-building tool for middle-class Americans. They reframed not being able to afford homes as not wanting homes, which is one of the most successful pieces of financial propaganda in modern history. Trap number 6. The side hustle burnout cycle. Millennials were sold on the idea that everyone needs multiple income streams and side hustles. Your 9 to 5 isn't enough. You need to monetize your passions. Start a side business. And while having multiple income sources can be smart, the way millennials were told to do it is actually a trap that prevents wealth building while creating burnout. Here's what actually happened. Millennials started driving for Uber after their day job, selling stuff on Etsy, doing freelance work on nights and weekends, and generally working 60 to 70 hours per week trying to generate extra income. But here's the problem. They were trading their time for money at low hourly rates instead of building actual assets or developing skills that increase their primary income. Driving for Uber makes you $15 to $25 per hour after expenses. That's your evenings and weekends burned for poverty wages. Selling on Etsy or doing random freelance gigs generates similar low hourly rates once you account for all the time spent. Meanwhile, those hours could have been spent developing skills that increase your main career income from $60,000 to $100,000, which is worth far more than grinding out side hustle poverty wages. The trap is that side hustles feel productive. You're hustling and grinding and making it happen, but you're actually just working multiple low-wage jobs simultaneously while burning yourself out and missing the opportunity to build real skills or assets. A real second income stream is something like rental property, dividend stocks, or a scalable business, not trading your limited free time for $20 per hour. Trap number 7, the treat yourself justification system. This trap is about the psychological framework that millennials use to justify excessive spending. I work hard, I deserve this. Life's too short not to enjoy it. You only live once. Self-care. These phrases are used to rationalize spending money on things that provide temporary pleasure but prevent wealth building. The trap works because the justifications sound reasonable. You do work hard, life is short, you should enjoy things. But when these become excuses for spending beyond your means or prioritizing immediate gratification over long-term financial security, they become wealth destroyers. And millennials use these justifications constantly to avoid the uncomfortable truth that they're spending too much. Trap number. Here's what this looks like in practice. A $6 coffee every morning is justified as self-care. That's $2,000 per year. A $50 brunch every weekend is justified as enjoying life. That's $2,600 per year. Multiple streaming services are justified as deserved entertainment. That's $500 per year. Frequent food delivery is justified as being too busy to cook. That's $3,000 per year. New clothes regularly are justified as necessary for work or self-expression. That's $2,000 per year. None of these individual purchases seem significant, but together they're $10,000 per year of money that could be building wealth instead of funding temporary pleasures. The psychological trap is that each individual purchase is small and easily justified, but the cumulative effect is devastating. That $10,000 per year from age 25 to 65, invested instead of spent, becomes over $4 million. The $6 daily coffee literally costs you millions in lifetime wealth. But pointing this out makes you sound like a joyless penny pincher who doesn't understand that people need to live their lives. Here's something that's going to make you uncomfortable. The reason millennials fall for all these traps is because they serve someone else's financial interests. The experience economy benefits travel companies, event organizers, and hospitality industries. Expensive city living benefits landlords and real estate investors. Student debt benefits universities and loan servicers. Renting forever benefits landlords. Side hustles benefit gig economy platforms. The treat-yourself economy benefits consumer product companies. Every single one of these traps extracts wealth from millennials and transfers it to corporations and older generations who own the assets. Millennials were convinced that these behaviors are smart, progressive, and aligned with their values, when they're actually just wealth extraction mechanisms disguised as lifestyle choices. The path out of these traps requires rejecting almost everything millennials were told about money. You need to buy assets instead of experiences. You need to live in affordable areas instead of expensive, cool cities. You need to avoid or pay off student debt aggressively. You need to pursue equity opportunities instead of just salary. You need to buy a home as soon as reasonably possible instead of renting forever. You need to build real skills instead of grinding side hustles. You need to save and invest instead of treating yourself constantly. This will feel wrong. Your friends will judge you. Social media will make you feel like you're missing out. The culture will tell you you're doing it wrong. But in 15 years, you'll be wealthy while everyone else is still trapped. In 25 years, you'll be financially independent while everyone else is panicking about retirement. In 35 years, you'll be secure while everyone else is working until they die because they never built assets. The choice is yours. You can keep following the advice that's kept an entire generation broke, or you can reject it and follow the boring, proven path to wealth that actually works. The traps are comfortable and socially acceptable. The escape route is uncomfortable and countercultural, but only one of them leads to actual wealth and freedom. So there you have it, the millennial money trap nobody warned you about. Experiences over things, expensive city living, student debt as investment, chasing salary over equity, renting forever, side hustle burnout, and treat yourself justifications. Every single one sounds reasonable on the surface, but functions as a wealth destroyer when actually implemented. Escape requires rejecting the entire millennial money framework and doing the opposite of what feels culturally acceptable. Your future wealthy self, financially independent while your peers are still trapped in the cycle, will thank you for having the courage to do what's smart instead of what's popular. So there you have it.